Okay, so section C was by far the worst section for many people. If you work out now your percentage for this section, a lot of you, I am betting, are kind of like 30% of the marks. It was awful. And I think it was mainly because a lot of you have just totally forgotten that you've got to apply your answers on research methods. Every single question on this section of the paper had to be applied. A lot of you just got out of the habit, lack of practice. It was just terrible. You need to go back to basics and think about how you apply every single answer. So off we go. This just showed a lack of preparation from a lot of you. You were told that data analysis was going to be on the paper, and many of you just hadn't gone back through it. So S was 5, so that got you 1 mark, but you had to say that S is the value of the least commonly occurring sign. So all you had to do was add up the plus signs, which was 12, and add up the negative signs, whichever occurs less times is S. So in this case, S occurs 5 times because the less frequently occurring sign was negative, so that therefore gives you S. That is simple and straightforward. That's all you had to do. But if you hadn't revised it, then obviously you wouldn't know what the S stood for. So yeah, a lot of you just drop in really silly marks here, so you need to be really careful. The next question here was again an applied question, and it was very poorly done across the board. A load of you only got 1 mark, and the 1 mark was awarded for no reference to the investigation. So here you had a choice. You could either elaborate several different reasons, so like list them, or you could go for one and fully elaborate that idea. But a load of you knew what the problems were with secondary data. You knew why primary data would have been better, but it was nothing to do with this stimulus. So many of you said primary data was better, but you didn't say why with these patients, because it gets their patients' experiences, whether they find it beneficial, you get greater insight. That's all you had to do. Many of you said why secondary data is duff. Yeah, fine, but it had nothing to do with this particular stimulus. You needed to be talking about the fact that their time off work might have been to unrelated issues. It might not have been to do with their depression. So secondary data is flawed in that sense. And then many of you could tell me that the researcher could manipulate the test and his findings to meet his hypothesis, but it had nothing to do with this test. So you needed to be talking about the patients and the treatment and the way that they were interviewed to get anything. Moving on to this next one, again, I was so frustrated marking this, as was everybody else. The amount of times that you have done these sampling questions is unbelievable. We've put one on every single test, and a load of you forgot this question, this word here, how. Explain how the psychologist would have got her sample and show your calculations. There was only 1 mark available for saying 12 and giving me the bog standard stratified sample calculation. You had to tell me exactly how she would do that. So you needed to identify that the sample was 20, the target population of men and women was 100, and that the subgroup was 60 men. That's the first thing that you need to do. You then needed to say that you would make that calculation. So you've identified what your stratified sample is, or your ratio. Then you place all the 60 male names into a generator and select the first 12. So a load of you ended up with that first mark. Some of you got the second mark by telling me what the bits of the formula were. And I think I personally, out of my classes, awarded the third mark to about 10 people. So really poor, that one. Moving on to the next question, so penultimate question. A load of you didn't get any credit on this because you were asked to give conclusions A load of you did not give conclusions. All you did was stated the results. You had to interpret the data and say what it showed. So there was no application from a load of you. If you just look at what I've said here, a really, really easy way to do a conclusion is to go back to the stimulus and see what the hypothesis was. When we teach you studies, we tell you the aim at the start, and then the conclusion is always in relation to that aim. Did the findings support that aim? Did they actually prove what they were testing? All right, did they actually find what they expected to see? So that's all you had to do. Go back and have a look at the hypothesis, have a look at what they were testing, and then give me a conclusion. So for example, when people believe that they're presenting to a large audience, they are less fluent in their spoken communication than when they believe the audience is small. All you then got to do is tell me that there was a higher average of mistakes. The standard deviation, again, you're just telling me that there's less varied or dispersed scores in those people who were presenting to a small audience. Okay, so it tells us the same thing. It tells us that this idea that when we think we're presenting to more people, then that affects our ability to speak and communicate fluently. But a load of you, just no marks because there was not any conclusions. And then if we move on to the last question, which was the peer review question. Sorry, I'm having a bit of problems with this. The peer review question was, most of you were picking up 1 out of 2. You were just giving me kind of like a bog standard answer saying that it allows us to check for errors. If you go back to your booklet, we gave you actually more detail than that. So the best answers that I was seeing were people who were talking about checking for fraudulent data to ensure that only high quality findings are published, people saying allocation of funding to universities, research grants, they were the better answers. So anything just generic, it was just going to get you 1 mark. So you needed to actually expand it with the material that you were given in the booklet. Okay, so the next thing that we just need to do here is go back to what you did well on your paper. And when I'm doing this with my students, you all need to write something down. Nobody gets 0 on these tests, okay, or not that I'm aware of. So everybody did something well. You need to go away from this positive thinking, yeah, I did this correctly. Even if you've failed the test overall, what did you get right? So look at what content areas you're good at and where you're picking up your marks. Fill that in, that top section of your feedback. Then you obviously need to look for your areas for development. Is it topic areas? Is it application? Is it expression? Is it terminology? What is it that's kind of pulling your marks back? So then think about what your areas for development. You all know your action points, so what will you do differently next time? Do you need to revise more? Do you need to do any resits? You all know the drill by now, so it's a resit if you fail, a resit if you're 2 grades below, resit in 1 section or 1 question if you're 1 grade below. Everybody's got something that they can work on, okay, so fill in that action points accordingly. Now, just lastly, if you are going to do this electronically, you need to scan your work and upload the file to turn it in. Now, the instructions are located directly below this video link on Moodle. Your teacher will be able to see what annotations you've made and your own feedback, kind of like the back page, so you must ensure that you do it. So once you've finished and once you've annotated it, go to the instructions for turn it in and follow them and submit it electronically, and then it saves the paper, it saves the feedback lesson, and we can see whether or not you've done that. So if everybody does that for me now, and just make sure that this is done for your deadline, which I'm guessing for most of you will be the end of this week. Okay guys, I hope this has been alright for you, okay, and we're going to probably do a bit more of this video feedback in the future. Any questions, then come and see me. This is Fiona doing the feedback, or just ask your subject teacher. Okay, well done.